Samuel Little, America's most prolific serial killer. Samuel Little, whose name might not be as widely recognized as that of notorious killers like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer, is, without question, the most prolific serial killer in American history. With 93 confessions and at least 60 confirmed murders, his crime spree spanned more than 3 decades in multiple states. Little preyed primarily on marginalized women, many of whom were involved in sex work or struggled with addiction. His killings went unnoticed for years, making his eventual capture and confession one of the most chilling true crime stories of modern times. Samuel Little was born on June 7, 1940, in Reynolds, Georgia. His early life was turbulent and filled with instability. He was raised primarily by his grandmother after his mother, who he claimed was a sex worker, abandoned him. This rough upbringing was the foundation for a life marred by criminal behavior. Little struggled academically, dropping out of high school and frequently getting into trouble. By his late teens, he had already been arrested multiple times for crimes ranging from petty theft to violent assault. Little's criminal record followed him throughout his life. He moved frequently, drifting from state to state, staying under the radar while committing various crimes, including armed robbery, fraud, and rape. Despite his criminal behavior, Samuel Little managed to avoid significant prison time for most of his life. It wasn't until much later that authorities realized his minor offenses were just the surface of a far darker history. Samuel Little's pattern of killing was particularly insidious. His victims were mostly vulnerable women, sex workers, drug addicts, or women who were estranged from their families, many of whom lived on the fringes of society. This was a key factor in why he was able to continue killing for so long without being caught. Many of his victims' disappearances were not immediately reported, or, in some cases, the women were misidentified or assumed to have died from drug overdoses. Little's method was chillingly consistent. He would often approach his victims in bars, on the streets, or in other public places, where he would charm or lure them into his car. Once isolated, he would strangle them to death. Unlike many serial killers who use weapons, Little relied on his physical strength. His preferred method of killing, manual strangulation, left little evidence behind, making it difficult for law enforcement to track him down. Many of his victims were found with no obvious signs of trauma, and their deaths were often misclassified as overdoses or accidents. Samuel Little's reign of terror stretched across the United States. He confessed to killings in California, Texas, Ohio, Florida, and more, with his first known murder taking place in 1970 and his last in 2005. The sheer number of victims and the vast geographic spread of his crimes made it nearly impossible for authorities to connect the dots. Additionally, the transient nature of his lifestyle, moving frequently and changing locations after each crime, kept him out of the spotlight. Law enforcement agencies at the time were not as equipped to communicate across state lines, and many local police departments were overwhelmed with cases. The victims, often women from marginalized backgrounds, did not receive the media attention or investigative resources that other high-profile cases did. As a result, Little's brutal acts went largely unnoticed, and for decades, he operated with impunity. Samuel Little was arrested multiple times throughout his life for various offenses, including theft, assault, and rape, but he often managed to escape long-term imprisonment due to lack of evidence. However, it was his arrest in 2012 that would finally bring his killing spree to light. At the time, Little was arrested on a drug-related charge in Kentucky, but authorities had also linked him to cold cases in Los Angeles through DNA evidence. In 2014, Samuel Little was convicted of 3 counts of murder for the killings of 3 women in California during the late 1980s. His victims in these cases had been beaten and strangled. The DNA evidence was irrefutable, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Though convicted of these 3 murders, it wasn't until Little's later confessions that the true scope of his crimes became known. Once in prison, Little began to talk. Over the course of several interviews with the FBI and Texas Ranger James Holland, he confessed to murdering 93 women across the United States. What was particularly disturbing about these confessions was how clearly Little remembered each victim. He provided detailed descriptions of his victims, where he had met them, how he killed them, and where their bodies could be found. He even drew sketches of many of his victims from memory. Little's confessions were a breakthrough in numerous cold cases. Law enforcement agencies across the country began re-examining unsolved cases, and many were able to link their victims to Little's accounts. To date, the FBI has confirmed at least 60 of Little's murders, though they believe the full number of victims is likely even higher. His willingness to talk and his vivid memory for details provided closure to many families who had been searching for answers for years. Samuel Little died in December 2020, at the age of 80, while serving his life sentence. His death brought some relief to the families of his victims, but the pain of his crimes continues to haunt those affected. The sheer number of lives he took, and the decades of suffering his actions caused, mark Little as one of the most terrifying figures in modern criminal history. His case also serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of improving communication between law enforcement agencies, paying attention to marginalized victims, and utilizing forensic technology to its fullest extent. Advances in DNA testing and interagency cooperation were instrumental in finally capturing and convicting Little, but his long reign of terror reveals significant gaps in the criminal justice system. Samuel Little's horrific legacy as America's most prolific serial killer is a stark reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight. His ability to operate unnoticed for so long highlights the importance of justice for all victims, regardless of their social status or background. While he is no longer a threat, his story serves as a crucial lesson in law enforcement's pursuit of justice for the forgotten, the marginalized, and the vulnerable. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy true crime stories and chilling unsolved mysteries, be sure to like this video, leave a comment, and hit that subscribe button for more spine-tingling content.